Hey folks, so today we're going to be talking about body paragraphs, and at this point you should have read the introduction material and listened to my lecture on introductory paragraphs, and you should have also completed the thesis statement lecture and reading because we're going to be building on that now. You also might have a few other documents out as I go through this lecture, including the in our Blackboard page. You might look at the criteria wiki. A lot of you had some great ideas about the sort of strengths and weaknesses of Leslie Bisgold's TED Talk, so you might have that out. And then I encourage you to have the 10 strategies to aid with logical explanation handout out, as well as the body paragraphs sheet that looks like this. And that's all attached to the attached to this lecture. So I'll give you a second if you can go ahead and get those pieces out. That would be great. Okay, so we're going to start by talking about what a paragraph is in really a broad sense, and then we're going to talk more specifically about how you can develop supporting paragraphs or body paragraphs for your upcoming evaluation essay. Okay, so first things first, I want to ask a few questions and we can think about these together. So what is the purpose of a body paragraph? And I want to say that most body paragraphs are driven by a writer's purpose, meaning they have a body paragraph has some point or some purpose that's unifying it. So, as a writer, you always want to ask yourself, well, what's the point of this paragraph? What's my purpose here? Why am I putting this paragraph together, right? What is it doing, right? Often paragraphs will be unified or cohesive, meaning that there's an overall point or there's an overall purpose that's threaded through the paragraph, meaning that that paragraph is united by a common idea. With regard to length, I know that students have a lot of questions about this. How long does body paragraph have to be? And I just want to say that they vary. Usually they're not shorter than 4 sentences. They're usually going to be longer than that. And usually they're shorter than a full page. If you have a body paragraph that is over a page, you might think, ooh, is this still unified? Am I still talking about the same point? Or have I, put a lot of different ideas into one paragraph? So they might be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 sentences long. They really will vary and should vary depending on your overall message or your point. But I would say if it's over a page, maybe that's a red flag. And if it's under 4 sentences, that might also be a red flag. With regard to organization, paragraphs, we as writers, we understand our points. We don't need to organize our ideas into paragraphs. We organize our ideas into paragraphs for readers, right? We're trying to help communicate a point. So when you're paragraphing or when you're constructing a paragraph, you want to think of why you're organizing those ideas into that paragraph, because really the only reason you're doing that is to help communicate your point to your audience. So thinking about, okay, what's organizing these ideas together? What's the unifying idea? What is this paragraph overall? What is the purpose of this paragraph overall? Those are all good questions to ask yourself. Okay, so that's some of the theory, but let's go ahead and look at this in practice. And having taught writing for years now, one way that you can think about organizing your paragraphs is using the pie paragraph method of organization. And this is just a series of questions really that might help you develop a full, thoughtful, and unified paragraph. So first, you might ask yourself, well, what's the point or purpose of this paragraph? And you might have that, and we'll look at an example in just a second. You might have the point or purpose of your paragraph as a topic sentence or a few topic sentences at the beginning of your paragraph. That way readers understand, oh, this is the point of this paragraph. So usually a body paragraph begins with your point, right? The big purpose of the paragraph. Often you're also going to have information that's supporting your point, right? So you might have details or evidence or other information that helps you develop that point, right? And that might be in the form of quotations, that might be in the form of examples, that might be in the form of information. And then this is so important And this connects to our reading, So What, Who Cares, which is going to be your reading that I say reading this week. The last part is your explanation. Why do all these details matter? So what? Who cares? You can't just drop in a bunch of information and expect your reader to understand what that information means. So in the explanation and evaluation part of your paragraph, that's where you help your reader make sense of the information that you're bringing in. And if you're asking yourself these 3 questions, this is a good pathway towards developing a unified, thoughtful, and purpose-driven paragraph. What's my point? What's my purpose in this paragraph? What information am I going to bring in to support my point? And why does this information matter? So what? Who cares? Why is this significant? If you get in the habit of asking yourself those questions, it'll be good for this first major essay, and it'll also be good for your timed writing. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a sample body paragraph written by a student here, okay? And you might pause and actually read this on your own, but I'm going to go ahead and go through it so we can think about how the pie paragraph can apply to an actual supporting paragraph. Okay, so let's check it out. So since Bisgold's speech took place at a TED Talk event at the University of Toronto, the speaker chooses to express her ideas about animal rights in a calm and academic manner. That is, Bisgold's discussion of animal rights illustrates a fairly formal and organized style. Pause. So notice that these first lines set up the author or the writer's point. Right? We can tell from these first, 4 lines that this paragraph is all about Bisgold's style, right? And her manner, her tone, right? So notice manner and style and tone, these kind of mean the same thing. And we can also tell that the student, the writer, is going to be talking about how her tone is academic, how it's calm, how it's organized, right? So we know the point of this paragraph. And so now we need some information, right? So that so we can see that this actually took place, so that the writer can prove that, yeah, this in fact was a formal speech. So let's see if they bring in some information to support it. Okay, so though she maintains the style throughout the speech, it is at the beginning of the talk that Bisgold first establishes herself as a direct and careful thinker. Quote, I want to begin by making 2 statements, one at a time. First, animals should be treated humanely. Second, animals should not be made to suffer unnecessarily, end quote. And notice they have the time that she said that there. Okay, so notice they brought in information here that proves or helps to support that Bisgold indeed had a formal style, right? So they use this quote here where she says first, second, one at a time, to illustrate the fact that it is a organized, direct speech, not one where she's, really casual. Hey guys, what's up? I'm going to be talking about a few points. Let's have some chit chat, right? So if that would be the opposite of a formal, organized, serious tone. So these sentences, this information from Bisgold's speech helps to illustrate the fact that, yeah, her style is fairly formal, fairly academic. Okay, but no way is that student done yet, right? They need to explain, or they need to explicate, or they need to say how this matters. Okay, so this is the important part. This is the actual evaluation where they bring in their judgment, they bring in their explanation, they bring in their evaluation. Okay, let's check out this last part. Here, Bisgold establishes that she has ordered her core claims carefully. In addition, she utters these lines evenly, audibly, and directly. Unlike some TED Talks that almost seem like bad sales pitches, Bisgold's manner indicates that her speech is meant to be taken as a serious discussion regarding animal rights. Ultimately, her decision to adopt a formal, clear tone is appropriate, especially since she is addressing an academic audience. Okay, so notice there's a lot going on there. Here's where this student makes the point that this was an appropriate decision, right? And notice that conclusion is very explicit. Hey, it was appropriate because she's talking to an academic audience. Notice they bring in a contrast, how some TED Talks are more like sales pitches. Bisgold's is not, so they use that to further her explanation. Notice that they directly talk about that quotation here, Bisgold, right? So they don't just move away from the quotation, they explicate it, they talk about what this information shows, right? So that's all the explanation and evaluation part of the paragraph. This is really important. So I want to point something out here. So this is a wonderful strategy that the student brings in, a contrast, right? Unlike some TED Talks that almost seem like bad sales pitches. But I think this is often a point where students get stuck. Like, how do I explain why my quotation matters or my overall point? How do I go further with it? And there's a lot of ways to do that explanation more. And this is something I changed the students' paragraph a bit. So this is something that I wrote in yellow here. But notice how you could have used a different strategy, or the student could have used a different strategy to explain the point. So notice here, everything's the same except this yellow part. Here, Bisgold establishes that she has ordered her core claims carefully. In addition, she utters these lines evenly, audibly, and directly. If Bisgold's manner had been informal and chatty, her audience may have not taken her speech as seriously. Ultimately, her decision to adopt a formal, clear tone is appropriate. So notice they could have used an if-then strategy too, right? And it would also make the point that her decision to adopt a formal tone was appropriate. So if you're wondering, what are all these strategies that you're talking about? Hey, I've put them in a handout for you. I've put 10 different strategies that you can use in order to get to that explanation and evaluation work. So if then can be really useful. If the speaker, so if Bisgold had not done then so we just saw that in my example. A comparison. So notice instead of doing a contrast, they could have done a comparison similar to other TED Talks right? So comparisons work, contrast, hypotheticals. Imagine if Bisgold had started to use colloquialisms and slang, what that would have done to her overall serious, right? So a personal testimony, this you might use once or twice in your essay. You don't want your essay to be all personal, but you might in one paragraph talk about as a viewer myself, this was the moment when, right? Rhetorical questions, expert opinion, right? Facts and stats, observation, figurative language. So lots of different strategies that you can employ in order to do that evaluation and explanation work. I've also put here 10 ways to link back to the topic. These are just phrases that you might find useful as you're building your paragraph. Feel welcome to use these. These are just phrases that anyone can use. So as this aspect of the speech indicates, by looking at this moment in the speech, viewers are able to notice. From this moment, viewers can see that in the speech there is. Notice how in the speech, because of blank, on account of blank, blank's use of blank reveals, right? So these are just phrases that might help you move your ideas forward if you get stuck. And then the final part of this handout is just some different verbs that you might find helpful. So if you're trying to introduce something that Bisgold said, you might use a word like this. She includes, she shows, she puts forward, the speech contains, she introduces, she states, right? If you're trying to evaluate something she says, you might use these words. So this part of the speech reveals, this part of the speech highlights. Here, Bisgold pushes, and this us should be listeners, pushes listeners to consider. This point reminds us, right? So these are, again, just words that you might find useful as you begin your essay. Final thing that I want to point out is a lot of this work, if you've been doing your criteria and result sheet, you'll notice that a lot of this work has already been done where you've pinpointed some point, right? And you've begun to evaluate how Bisgold either met or failed to meet that point. So this is also something that you might find helpful as you're working on those body paragraphs. Okay, folks, so this week you'll be working on those body paragraphs because next week we will be beginning to conference on your actual first drafts. So I encourage you to begin digging in to those body paragraphs. If you have more questions, I encourage you to review this and the materials again. But just remember that next week I will be giving you explicit feedback on your paragraphs and on your writing. Thanks, guys.